Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at onepassword.com/XAM. That's onepassword.com/XAM.
Packet pushers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Packet Protector.
Yeah. Whatever week it is.
Yep. So, JJ here with Drew. We are at Security Field Day.
Security Field Day 12 in sunny Millbrae, California. And we heard over 2 days from 4 vendors, DigiCert, Dell, SonicWall, and Citrix, about their security strategies, their security position in the market, some of the things they're working on. So we thought we would do a quick wrap of what we heard and our impressions. So maybe we should dive right in.
Dive right in.
So the first vendor that we heard from was DigiCert. Just some background, DigiCert is a certificate authority. They issue SSL certificates, TLS certificates, but they've also expanded into other areas. One of the things they provide is what they call essentially a digital trust platform. So they provide a whole platform to help you manage all of the certificates in your environment. They can do inventory. They can help you with revocation, updating, and so on as needed. So one of the things we actually heard from DigiCert was, in fact, the breadth of the platform.
It was pretty comprehensive, and I think, certs are one of those things that we all deal with in different ways to varying degrees. So, everything from we manage network infrastructure and we have certificates for hardening the device for secure management to we're rolling them out to all of the endpoints and we've got a whole PKI infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So this was kind of interesting to see the holistic picture of being able to really discover. I mean, I think one of the powerful things I thought was interesting was their ability to discover it. So they integrate with other CAs. I think they listed several of those.
Right, and with other discovery tools, vulnerability assessment tools. So I think their point is that you may not actually have a good sense of how many certificates are actually in your environment, what the state of those certificates are, and you don't want to be as surprised when a certificate's life ends and suddenly a device goes dark.
That's so morbid. Suddenly your certificate's life ends and then it goes dark.
And it fades away. It goes to
like
certificate
every time
heaven.
You hear a bell ring, a certificate goes
Yes,
to heaven.
Goes to certificate, hopefully heaven. We don't know what that certificate was up to during its life.
Somewhere there's certificate hell. That's where all of your wildcard and your self-signed certificates go. They go to certificate hell and then you follow them. So yeah, some of the numbers that they threw out were interesting. Organizations have an average of 55,000 different certificates. Again, because we're talking about the breadth of things that, applications can have certificate, components can have certificates, et cetera. Oh, and they said that too, that they threw out a number that I think was something like they're on 3 billion devices, from satellites to whatever, and IoT devices because of
Medical
that.
devices. And,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was Mocana.
Yes, they acquired a company called Mocana.
Yes. So embedding certificates on IoT devices in embedded systems with the manufacturers. So that was a pretty interesting thing. And they've got a whole, I think it was called Trust Core SDK. So really interesting stuff there. And I think we might have to have them back to talk about that, which we also talked about the Connectivity Standards Alliance and the Matter protocol. Mm-hmm. And I think it was like episode 17, we had Steve Hanna on to talk about Matter. So DigiCert is actually one of, or the CA for Matter. Yeah, so really cool kind of full circle stuff there.
And of course, I think one of the things they wanted to talk to us about was post-quantum encryption, because we all know quantum computers are being developed, and the way quantum computers work, they are particularly good at doing the factoring required to guess what the factor of your 2 large primes are to make your encryption algorithm. So NIST has recently approved, is it 3 or 4 new quantum-resistant encryption standards. Algorithms. So this is one of those things where it's not an emergency, but people should be thinking about.
Yeah, we got to think about it.
Let's get these PQE certificates, algorithms out into production. Let's start experimenting before it actually becomes an emergency.
Yeah.
One of the things they mentioned was like when SHA-1 got deprecated and everybody had to move to SHA-2, they had a customer that, because of the breadth of their environment, it took them like 7 years to finally do that.
Yeah, it's
You
painful.
don't want to be in that position, like a 7-year completion. Yeah. If you're in an environment where a nation state has a quantum computer and you're worried about them breaking your encryption.
Yeah, we have the algorithms. The manufacturers of everything should be starting to integrate that into their solution offering. And so we need to just start. It doesn't make sense not to, right? It's not like we have to add a license or a feature or buy new stuff. We just need to start thinking about that.
Right. Yeah, and we also did a whole episode on post-quantum encryption on packet pushers. We'll have that link in the show
Yeah.
notes if you want to get more detail, because we're just doing a little overview here. But
Yep. And we did one with ahead of Security Field Day with Tech Field Day too.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And then I'm going to sing at some point, get down with PQC. Yeah, you know me. Who's down with PQC? Every last homie. Not Drew. He's just laughing at me.
I don't know. Are we violating copyright somehow with that? I'm not sure.
You know, that was bad enough that there's no way that's going to be a copyright validation. No. Oh, speaking of validation, the other thing we were talking about with certificates is, so first of all, let me just reiterate this. Don't be using self-signed and wildcard certs. You know, sans certs are fine. But we are used to certificates with a life cycle of like, you know, we start off with like 10 years, right? Because we don't want to touch that again. It sucks.
The life cycle of a cert has shortened, I guess.
Yeah, it's shrinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started with like 10 years and 5 years and then 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. We've had 90 days and now we have some manufacturers, I think Apple is one of them, maybe even Google, talking about 45-day certificates.
Wow.
And there are some applications in like microservice, you know, cloud native world that might even be shorter than that, like very short lives of maybe seconds or minutes, depending on what's happening. So yeah, managing certificates, we've got volume, we've got sprawl of different types of certificates, and now we've got more of them because we're going to have to be changing them out more quickly.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we've heard a lot from DigiCert recently, just sort of in the industry, because I think they see the conversation around quantum encryption and post-quantum cryptography as being an opportunity for them to be like, hey, by the way, we're more than just a CA. We do other interesting things. Maybe you need to be thinking about some of the stuff we do.
Yeah, and I like the integrations that they showed. So you mentioned, you know, some of the vulnerability scanners. They can also integrate with other CAs.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like you could use their platform, I think it's even called something like DigiCert 1, to have visibility over the entire landscape of TLS certificates, PKI certificates, Microsoft, fill in the blank, and maybe even probably, you know, some of the medical and niche markets and industries have their own weird CAs that they're dealing with. So it sounds like you could integrate into most of those things.
Yeah. Oh, and just as a reminder, because this is a Security Field Day event, everything that we're talking about, there are videos of the presentations available online that you can watch, and we'll link to those if something we're talking about, you want to find out more about. The actual videos there where all of the delegates were asking questions and stuff, and so you can see the presentation, you can see the slides, it'll all be there.
Asking questions, harassing.
Sometimes harassing,
sometimes
gently harassing.
Yeah, not us, not Drew and I.
No, we're very polite.
After that, in the afternoon yesterday, we had Dell.
Yep, Dell came in, and you may be thinking, well, what does Dell have to do with security? And that was sort of their reason for showing up at Security Field Day. They're experimenting with some marketing to be like, well, yeah, Dell does do security. And they came at it in three sort of different broad areas. One was the hardware supply chain. They take some care to make sure that of the components that they're integrating are what they are, and they can use cryptography to sort of track and verify that everything that you ordered from the factory is what you get when it shows up, including firmware. I guess when you're ordering, you know, laptops or servers or whatever from Dell, you can check a box to say, I want to be able to track this and verify when it ships to me. So that was one of the ways they're talking about security. They also offer managed detection and response services as a service. Mm-hmm. And then they also talked about their backup capability with their data domain product being a way, kind of a security play, in that if you are hit with ransomware, having good backup and recovery practices is going to help you recover from that security event.
Yeah. So rewinding a little bit there, the feature they have is called Secure Component Verification. Mm-hmm. And this was actually pretty interesting to me because I think everybody's thinking about SBOMs. I was out one week and you did
an SBOM episode, software bill of materials.
Yeah. So this was really interesting because if you want to, they actually use cryptography down at the component level. So yeah, you log into some portal, you can click a button, you can get all of the different components that were integrated into that platform. So, you know, thinking about Dell, we think about, you know, endpoints, but also servers and storage and, you know, a whole breadth of portfolio related to compute. They said several interesting things that relates to their current portfolio. One of the things is they said they are allowed to legally state that they are the most secure commercial PC.
Yes.
That hung in with me, obviously, because I'm repeating it now. I don't remember the details of that, but I think that might be something to poke into a little bit later.
I feel like it's one of those like marketing things where, I don't know, does it really matter that much? But it mattered to them to go, I guess, find a way to be able to legally say that. I don't know, but
I think it's very possible that they're prevalent in the federal space. I mean, a lot of the large vendors, right? Dell,
Sure.
HPE.
Yeah.
So that's probably a great thing for them. The other thing that they mentioned was something about like enforcing things like dual authentication for sensitive commands on some of their platforms. Mm-hmm. So that was another little weird thing that I kind of heard in my ears, perked up a little bit because I don't work in the server storage data center area, so maybe that's just normal. but certainly an interesting feature. Now, in the MDR world, that's where I think we all got caught by surprise a little bit. I was not expecting to hear Dell come swinging in with a whole managed detection response offering.
Yeah, and I feel like they sort of were saying to us, like, we have a hard time saying, and we're in security, but sort of everybody in the room was like, well, you have an MDR service, so
Yeah.
why do you feel uncomfortable saying that?
Yeah. I think the first thing he said was, we're the biggest security company you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably kind of accurate at this point.
It could be, yeah.
But their MDR service, so if you're watching the videos from Security Field Day 12, what you'll see is, they do cover some of the portfolio things that we talked about, server storage endpoint. The MDR stuff is its own little beast. It's not in any way like tied to their products and portfolio.
Right. You don't have to be a Dell hardware customer to use their MDR service.
Yeah.
You can own whatever.
Yeah.
They're just doing a standard managed detection and response offering. Yeah.
Yeah.
For whatever platforms you're on.
I thought that was really interesting. They do have several partner relationships like Index Engines and the CyberSense platform that they talked about during Security Field Day as well. And they threw out, I think, a 5.9 level of confidence in detection based on statistical analysis. So like 99.99 or 999. It was 4 or 5 9% level confidence in their detection there. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think most organizations can't handle a full-time SOC because if you're running, doesn't matter what it is, any operation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've done this math a few times for different customers. It's really like bare minimum and you're not going to do a great job. We're in the neighborhood of about 7 headcount. That's for, keeping
24/7.
Yeah. Now you start getting into people who are actually trained for certain activities and things, like incident response and threat hunting and forensic analysis. And now that number starts you multiply that 1.5 to, but bare minimum, you're talking about 7 or 8 people plus all the tools. So yeah, I think managed detection response from them is really interesting. And, it's a brand I think people trust. I think that's an interesting thing. We'll keep our eye out and see what they're going to be doing in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So day 2, we started off with SonicWall, and SonicWall obviously is a good...
Which is funny because for a while Dell owned SonicWall.
Right, that's
and
true.
I got
they
so
did talk about
confused
that.
when I saw the stuff in the folder. And there was Dell
They don't
and
anymore.
SonicWall commingled together.
And SonicWall's pitch essentially was they want to reintroduce the SonicWall platform. Maybe you haven't been thinking about SonicWall, but they want to get their name back out there. Very much channel driven, very much targeting the SMB space. They said they have almost 600,000 customers, which is a large number.
It doesn't surprise me because they really are prevalent in the managed, like in MSP space, managed service providers.
Yep.
Yeah, I was shocked, frankly. So just full transparency here, I spent a couple decades at a reseller. Part of the time we were pretty hot and heavy with SonicWall, who during the time we were hot and heavy with them, I would say had enterprise solutions.
Yes.
And I don't know what happened in SonicWall's life, but they got the reputation. You know how like when there's always the girl or the guy in high school and they get a reputation? So SonicWall. Something happened, yeah. And they're like, and maybe
something happened under the bleachers. And
so SonicWall had this reputation of being SMB, but they actually had a really robust enterprise portfolio for a bit. But then, they were public and then they were private and then they were part of Dell and then they were spun off and then it was private equity. And frankly, after that like second or third handoff after Dell, I kind of assumed it was sort of that ship was sailing or sinking, certainly away from what we were doing in the enterprise space.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is that they got kind of reinvigorated and re-energized. They have Banyan Security, which was, from what we saw today, a pretty freaking robust SASE, SSE kind of play with ZTNA. And they've been in the market for a while. I mean, it is really a new SonicWall.
It does feel like the acquisition of Banyan Security has reinvigorated SonicWall. It's given them some oomph to get back out in the market to... Again, they said, we're trying to reintroduce ourselves to the security community. And I think by leading with Banyan, they have a good case to make. Banyan was a startup in the SSE space, Secure Service Edge, and they do have a pretty robust security services edge offering.
They did. And Chirag and Tarun, I think, went full YOLO and just did live demos.
Yeah, they did a live demo. Respect.
All worked perfectly. Kudos to them for that. But what I was impressed with is, I've seen a lot of different vendors in the SASE and SSE space, including several firewall vendors. And it's always a little bit clunky, I think, anytime, either way, right? If you have a traditional kind of networking on-prem firewall vendor who's trying to do things that need to have some presence in the cloud or some connection to the cloud or integration, that's always a little bit clunky. And vice versa. Those vendors that are doing like ZTNA and SASE and SSE that are, I'm air quoting, cloud native, have a lot of problem transferring that to on-prem.
Yeah.
But I really felt like what we saw today was basically SonicWall, a la the Banyan security solutions that were integrated, was really pretty freaking slick. Like they've thought through it. The workflows seemed very reasonable. It didn't feel clunky. It felt very intuitive. And I think we were kind of looking and, if you look at some of the big names we were talking about, like, the Zscalers of the world and things like that, I think they're saying like they've got 80% of the features,
Yes.
but at half the cost or less.
Right.
And something that looks a lot easier to configure and deploy.
Right, and now being associated with SonicWall, which is definitely targeting the SMB market, that's a rich area for Banyan security, which is now Cloud Secure Edge inside the SonicWall portfolio.
That's right, Cloud Secure Edge, yeah.
To go after that market. And just so you know what we're talking about, the Cloud Secure Edge has three components. It's an endpoint agent that goes on the end device. They also have a browser-based client, and that does your device posture. They tie into third-party identity services, so your Microsoft Entra, your Okta, whatever, which is essential if you're going to do zero trust. You need that identity piece. The endpoint agent connects into their cloud POPs. That's where they have all of the security controls. So a VPN to get there, zero trust network access, CASB, DLP, secure web gateway, firewall. That's where you add all the security controls. And then it's all managed via software as a service portal.
Yeah, so it doesn't feel like the clunkiness of a traditional firewall vendor that tried to do SSE or SASE. It actually, because of, I guess, the Banyan Security acquisition, and they acquired, I forget the name, but they acquired a managed security services company, I think based out of Virginia, and they've integrated that into their offering as well. So you can get that as a managed platform. So the things I talked about, if you're looking through the videos, well, first of all, let me just kind of rewind a little bit. So the zero trust capabilities around this kind of ZTNA type solution where you can use it to control and connect to on-prem. And that's where the integration with, the traditional SonicWall firewalls comes into play. It looks like there literally is an easy button to, like, you click it and that's it. It sounded like the licensing for that was just built in.
I think so, yeah. That's what I took away, yeah.
You can do access to on-prem. You can do access to anything in the cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, et cetera. You can do certain controls to SaaS applications. And it had some interesting visibility into like user and device context and scoring. So that posturing you were talking about.
Yep.
And then they talked about the Sonic platform, which was kind of this, central management for if you're MSP or if you're just an organization that has multiple sites and locations where you can kind of deal with all of the devices you have, the licensing. And I think, did they even show when they got into some of that you can do certain things like monthly and kind of...
Yeah, they were trying to make their licensing simplified and a lot more easy to consume.
Yeah. And, coming from an integrator and reseller side who also did some MSSP stuff, that's really nice because, God, you guys know, like co-terming licenses and subscriptions and support. And when you're adding things, it's just not flexible. So that model, I think, is fantastic, both for the customers, but also for all of the different integrators and resellers and managed service partners.
Yeah. I think the other big message SonicWall was trying to get across is that they are, which everybody is now, but they are also pursuing a platform play, meaning essentially they want you to be all in on their products. So the SonicWall firewall, SonicWall SD-WAN, SonicWall switches, SonicWall APs, all managed from a common interface. You'll also see that message coming from vendors like Fortinet, Palo, Arista, Juniper recently came out with it. And we'll talk a little bit about Citrix next. They're also going after a platform play sort of, at least for ZTNA. So that's the other message they're trying to get across. If you are just looking for a simplified solution to handle your security and networking needs, SonicWall wants to be on your short list.
Yeah, and it sounded like their sweet spot for size was around 1,000, users.
For the SSE service, the Cloud Secure Edge, they said they have deployments with customers of up to 50,000, but around 1,000 is sort of their sweet spot.
So that kind of mid-market, lower mid-market size,
Frankly, I think it's great because the Zscalers, the Palos of the world are going after that sort of Fortune 500, Fortune 1,000, 2,000 or whatever. There's a huge swath of folks who can use those controls, particularly zero trust access. So it's great to know that there are options in the market targeting the mid-tier.
Yeah, and I think for the MDR services there as well, because again, spinning up a full-time SOC for most people is just cost prohibitive. But even outsourcing that, because most of the MDR solutions and the SOC as a service, if they're really good, and I mean, I don't know all of them, but I've vetted and tested out a lot over the years. They're going to start at $30,000 or $50,000 a year, which is a really good price if you're considering that, you're talking about half of a head, right? Half of a full-time or a third instead of investing in 8 people or something like that. But still, for a smaller size organization, when you start talking about $30,000 and $50,000, it still can be a lot of money.
It can be a reach. Yeah.
So it really feels like, I'm usually very skeptical about this, so I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but it feels like they are really doing the right thing with this platform and the managed service, and that it is actually very viable and not just lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, the fact that SonicWall did come out of private equity and felt like the company had been underinvested in, which is sort of a private equity move. The fact that they've purchased a startup in the SSC space, it does feel like there's some energy inside the organization now trying to move forward and make a better play. So we'll see if they can
They're
keep it up.
excited.
Yeah, they are excited.
Definitely be something to watch. I would say, they're back in the game, people.
Right. Yeah, don't just write them off if
Yeah.
you're thinking about the old SonicWall.
Yep.
Let's pause for a message from today's sponsor, 1Password. Imagine your company's security is like the quad of a college campus. There are nice brick paths between the buildings. Those are the company-owned devices, IT-approved apps, and managed employee identities. And then there are the paths people actually use, the shortcuts worn through the grass to the actual straightest line from point A to B. Those are the unmanaged devices, shadow IT apps, and non-employee identities like contractors. And most security tools only work on those happy brick paths, but lots of security problems take place on the shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all these unmanaged devices, apps, and identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. 1Password Extended Access Management solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't. It's security for the way we work today, and it's now generally available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and in beta for Google Workspace customers. Check it out at onepassword.com/XAM. That's onepassword.com/XAM. And now back to the podcast. And the last presenter was Citrix. When I saw that Citrix was presenting when we signed up for this, I was like, okay, what's this going to be about? And frankly, I came away a little surprised. They are also talking about zero trust network access. And I thought, really? Aside from, VDI, which I guess you could sort of twist that into being zero trust, what do they have? But they have actually done some investing in building out, again, a zero trust access platform using endpoint-based agents, an enterprise browser, and then there's they call it a connector, but it's sort of a proxy that you connect to do the enforcement, or you can connect to the NetScaler ADC to do enforcement on-prem. So they've got a cloud option and an on-prem option.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you're doing enforcement with something zero trusty or any type of network access, really, you've got to have one of two things or both things. You have to have a point of enforcement.
Yes.
And control and the policy, but then also if you're talking about security from an encryption standpoint, you want kind of two ends of a tunnel if those two things are not co-located.
Yes.
So in some ways it makes sense. Now, I think at this point in time with what they have, it's very interesting and compelling, especially for organizations that already invested in Citrix.
Yes.
I wouldn't put it with the same feature set that we're seeing from some of the other vendors that have like full, endpoint visibility and or full integration, because I think even SonicWall had like a ton of, CrowdStrike and Sophos and Defender and
that they integrated
with. Yeah. And so I don't think Citrix is trying to do that, but especially for larger organizations that have such, scale and a lot of their own applications, it's like, why not take advantage of the infrastructure you already have? So
Right.
You've got the Workspace app for people that are accessing VDI. You've already got the NetScalers that are sitting there in front of your applications. So to leverage that, I think, is really pretty slick.
Yeah, so their approach is called Citrix Secure Access. And again, this is also agent-based. They have either a full client agent or, again, an enterprise browser providing the endpoint control that goes up to a broker. Again, they're also tying into third-party identity providers, your Entras, your Oktas, Ping, and so on, again, which is essential if you're going to do ZTNA. They're also doing device posture checks. That's why they have that endpoint capability. They also can integrate with mobile device managers like Intune, so they can get some visibility into what's happening. They ran a demo where they showed somebody as an endpoint user logging into their work for the day and then going in and turning off the Microsoft firewall and then trying to access a new resource. And the client said, that's not allowed by your posture, so we're blocking this connection. Please contact an administrator. Mm-hmm. So it was a nice sort of clean interface. So if you're looking to get a sense of what this actually looks like, check out the video.
Yeah. So some of the other features that they talked about with that were being able to set policies per application. So I think they were calling them, air quoting, trust policies, which is kind of what Drew was just describing with like, what are your requirements in the context of that user and that device? The agent and agentless mode. So in their case, agentless is using a browser, and some of the other solutions were doing things like reverse proxy. So this is a little bit different from that perspective, but I think a really good and interesting option for things like BYOD and certain contractor access. And they did show some interesting enforcement and visibility with that browser control. Basically, I'm going to totally misuse this word, but it was kind of like sandboxes the experience, so that they described it as nothing is being passed from the operating system in through the browser. So credentials, et cetera, things that might get hijacked or stolen and stored when they shouldn't be. So it's just kind of like this clean sandbox to work in, or clean room maybe.
Yeah, they also said it's a VPN replacement. They're not doing essentially a tunnel that you just go right through. It's every application that you fire off on the endpoint gets its own individual session and connection.
Yeah.
So they're providing that more fine-grained control than your traditional IPsec VPN.
Yeah, and I did like to, I'm a huge fan of like visibility and troubleshooting, especially when you talk about access policies, because God, I mean, especially now with all the different tools, every once in a while, like something gets blocked and I'm like, okay, which thing blocked it?
Right.
Was it my EDR software? So they had a really neat, well, two things. They had a policy modeling tool, which coming from the NAC space with network access control solutions, I really like this because not every vendor integrates this into their tool set, but it's a huge benefit to the administrators of the system because what you can do is you can simulate any user or group of users trying to do something and evaluate the policy against that behavior and see if it's going to be allowed or fail, and if that's the experience you expect, or if you're using that for troubleshooting. So I like the policy modeling. And then they also had that Citrix monitor for troubleshooting, which had a view, they were calling it the topology view, and it did remind me of, working in network infrastructure. A lot of the vendors have a view of like, let's say it's wireless and wired. You've got the user, the endpoint, the SSID they're on, the AP they're on, the wired switch port up through the router, out through the internet, et cetera. So it was basically that type of view, but through their infrastructure, going from the app, that workspace app that the user was using, all the way through to whatever the resource was. And so, they were describing, well, you see all the logs and you get all the data down here, but you have this visual view of that topology and where something failed in a description.
Yeah. The one thing I feel like they've designed a good product, I just feel like it's primarily aimed at existing Citrix customers, sort of keep them in the fold, add value to the investments they've already made, which is great. They should be doing that. I think they may have a harder time going out to folks who aren't already bought into the Citrix ecosystem. There may be some features and some capabilities that they don't have yet that they're going to need. Like they don't have an SD-WAN, an SSE, or a SASE capability, and they're doing partners like with Zscaler and so on for that, which sounds
Well, I don't think they're doing like
complicated and
CASB and
Yeah, no, they're definitely not.
SWG.
Yeah, Secure Web Gateway and all that DLP.
Yeah. I don't think they plan to.
No, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they're happy doing this zero trust play.
So I mean, I feel like if you're in the Citrix ecosystem, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, but if you're not, you need to find out, is
Yeah.
this solving a problem I have
Yes.
that's worth buying into the Citrix ecosystem?
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to duplicate if it's like you needed a whole, SSE or SASE type of, and it's hard to even compare those products because of the pedigree. A cloud vendor looks very different than a traditional kind of firewall vendor.
Yeah.
So you don't get the same feature parity to the same degree, even if they look the same on the marketing documents. But if you need those things, if you need to say, hey, I need to treat every user, like I need to wrap the bubble around the devices while they're floating around the world because they're not on-prem, and I need that full suite, I think that's not the right place for this. And I don't think that's what they're trying to do.
No, I don't think so. My takeaway was that if your top priority is, I really need tight control over who's accessing what and when, and visibility into that, and good control over what they're doing, this could be a useful solution. If you're also wanting to make sure that like malware is not getting spread to an endpoint, maybe not. That's more of a SSE SASE play. But if that zero trust capability and that visibility into who's accessing your applications and doing what, and you're already in on the Citrix ecosystem, it's worth a look.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I do want to say this. It sounds like my understanding is you don't have to have like the net scaler. You can put these connectors that would look, so in the zero trust architecture would be a zero trust enforcement point. So they have these other little kind of virtual connectors that you can put in front of other resources.
Yeah, you don't have to do the NetScaler.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks guys. Thanks Drew.
Yeah, thanks
Take us
JJ.
out.
Again, thanks to Security Field Day for inviting JJ and I and a bunch of other great people as delegates. And I think that's one of the great things about the Field Day events is that you hear from practitioners in the field who are coming in very grizzled and have been burned many times talking to vendors. So the videos are worth your time if you're investigating one of these products to just get a look at, what are your peers actually saying to these vendors to find out what works and what doesn't. So we'll have links to all those videos. Just so you know, Field Day paid for us to come out and covered our hotel and lodging, but there was no other compensation either from Field Day or the vendors.
Yeah, this is not a sponsor session.
It's not a sponsored thing at all.
But we have fun. We get to meet really fantastic people. There's lots of love, lots of snark. It's
it's a nice community.
Yeah, it's a great community. And
they're always looking for folks.
they are always looking. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, so if you think you would like to be a delegate, reach out to the Field Day crew. They're always interested in bringing new people on.
Yeah. And if you see videos of Tom Hollingsworth, he's fantastic. He is a lovely human. That's just his resting curmudgeon face. He really does like you and will appreciate you reaching out to him. He's always looking for great delegates. He's also always looking for the companies to come participate in things like Security Field Day and various tech field days. And I think Security Field Day is still the hidden gem. And it's, I think, underrated because there's just so much great opportunity to see what's going on in the space and to have this interaction with the vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that wraps up this episode of Packet Protector. Thank you for listening. If you want to reach out to us, you can hit us up at packetpushers.net/FU. The FU's for follow-up.
FU!
FU. We'd love to get your comments, your corrections. If you've got a show idea or something you want us to cover, you can reach out there. You can also find JJ and I on LinkedIn or the various socials. And as always, thanks for listening.